Now let us discuss different types of communications under Indian Evidence Act. Different types of communication starts from section 122. Communication during marriage. What is the meaning of this term? During the subsistence of the marriage between the husband and wife, any communication given by one spouse to other that is protected under law. The party who has disclosed certain communication to the other spouse, that spouse is not bound under law or not directed under law to disclose the same, because that is protected under communication chapter. So any communication between husband and wife or between communication between wife and husband is protected under Indian Evidence Act. That is called communication during subsistence of the marriage. Then official communication, section 124, that is relating to any communication that is derived by a public office or any public officer by holding that official assignment or official post, that is called official communication. For example, Office of Inspector of Police. Police got certain reliable information from source that regarding certain incident or certain offense. So that police is protected under law, that he is not bound to disclose from which source he got the information. That protection is called official communication as given under section 124. So certain public officers are there, they are protected under law and they are not bound to disclose from which source they got the information. Those type of communications or those type of information are called official communication. Then coming to professional communication, that is under 126 section of evidence. Professional means any professional person, whatever the communication given to a professional person by his client or somebody is protected under law. No police officer is bound under law to ask that professional person what information he derived from his client, like that. So that type of protection given under law is called the confidential communication, or that is professional communication, that is protected under law, that is under section 126. Then another type of communication that is given under section 127 of Evidence Act, that is called confidential communication with legal advisor. Suppose a person who is holding a legal office, he is a legal advisor. Any communication given to any legal advisor, he is protected under law. That communication cannot be disclosed. He is not bound and he is not obliged under law to disclose any communication given to him by his client or by his party. That's why these are different types of communication from 122 to 129. Different types of communication, these are protected under law. So the person who is holding these offices, they should be very careful by keeping the utmost dignity of this communication given by his client or customer or any person given under law. So these are certain communications. Now let us discuss very important chapter, that is called section 133 of Evidence Act, that is called accomplice. Accomplice, who is called an accomplice? An accomplice shall be a competent witness against the accused, and conviction is not illegal because it proceeds upon uncorroborated testimony of an accomplice. Suppose in a case, in a docility case, 6 persons are accused. Out of this, one person having confidence with the police, the person took or selected that one person to be an accomplice, and basing on the evidence or statement of that accomplice, the entire prosecution case will be established in the court of law. So police can keep confidence of that man and police will declare that man to be accomplice, and basing on his uncorroborated testimony before the court, the conviction can sustain to other 5 accused persons. So that is the purpose of this term accomplice. So accomplice are mainly chosen by the prosecution or by the investigator. If they are having confidence on any one other person and they are very much 100% hopeful that the entire prosecution will be divulged or that will be disclosed by this one particular witness, they can declare that person to be accomplice. So a certain protection is given to that accomplice. The basing on the uncorroborated testimony of that accomplice also, a case can be established to convict or to punish other persons under law. So it is very important role for the prosecution agency to declare a person to be accomplice. So this plays a very vital role in this trial of cases, especially very any large volume cases, just like any murder cases or any docaity cases where a group of persons are involved. In those cases, the role of accomplice comes into a very good role, and the prosecution used to establish the case through the evidence of this accomplice. Now we will come to this is another principle of law. Whether a particular number of witnesses is required to prove a case, that is given under section 134, that relates to number of witnesses. Law says sole testimony of a person is sufficient to convict a person. It is not that 3 or 4 witnesses are required to corroborate each other so as to bring a conviction to a person. Basing on the sole testimony of a person, a case can be established. In case of rape cases, basing on the sole testimony of prosecutors, the entire case can be established, even though it is not getting full corroboration from medical source. Even though in that cases, it basing on the single testimony that is sufficient to establish the case, and the accused will be convicted. That's why it is said that the quality of the witness is required, not quantity of the witness. So, in accepting the entire evidence of a case, the testimony of a single witness is also very much relevant, and basing on the sole testimony, if it inspires confidence and it is cogent and believable, the court can also punish the person basing on the sole testimony. So, there is no straight-jacket formula that unless there is a corroboration from many witnesses, a person cannot be punished. That is a wrong conception. Basing on the single testimony or sole testimony, a person can also be punished under law. Now, we will discuss different types of examination, cross-examination. Examination in chief, examination in cross, then re-examination, that is given under section 137 of Evidence Act. Any statement given by the witness after taking oath in the court, his statement is called examination in chief. And what is to be seen in the examination? It is to be seen that the statement given by the witness in the court that must get corroborated with the statement given under 161 CRPC, which was recorded by the investigator during investigation stage. If the statement of the chief examination is getting corroboration with the statement of his prior statement recorded by police or investigator, so once there is a corroboration, it is a very good piece of evidence tendered by the prosecution witness, that is called examination in chief. So, all the statement given by the witnesses who has been cited as a witness in the charge sheet, his statement, that statement is called examination in chief. Then, once the chief statement is recorded, it is the duty of the adverse party, the other side, they will put cross-examination to the witness to elicit the truth, whether the witness given by the witness is correct or wrong. So, that will be elicited in cross-examination. That is the limited purpose for eliciting the truth. That is called cross-examination. The adverse party will put question to the witness to find out the truth. So, that type of putting question by the adverse party to the witness is called cross-examination. Now, let us say after cross-examination, the witness will be discharged by the court. Once the witness is discharged, subsequently it was detected that certain very vital things have been omitted wrongly or due to not presence of mind of on behalf of the prosecutor, then definitely there will be chance for recalling the same witness, that is called re-examination of the witness. A witness who has already been examined by the court can be recalled. There is a provision under CRPC, that is 311 of CRPC stipulates that a witness who has been examined may be recalled for further examination. But you remember one thing, that recall is not a meant for patch up the lacuna, it is meant for to give justice. Anything that is required, it is the inherent power of the court. Court can suo motu recall, or on the application of the party, a witness can be recalled. So that once the witness will be recalled and further his evidence, whatever he will adduce before the court, that type of examination or that type of statement is called re-examination. Once the party will give his evidence on re-examination, the adverse party again will cross-examine. He will be given opportunity to cross-examine the witness. So that type of evidence is called re-examination. So these are very vital things for witness of prosecution, and once the chief is given, cross will be there. Once re-examination will be there, re-cross-examination will be there. So this is the system stipulated under section 137 of Evidence Act. Now we will discuss very two important aspects, that is section 145 and 154. 145 stipulates cross-examination as to previous statement. This is of course very much relevant for prosecution side. Cross-examination to the previous statement. Any statement that is given by the witness under 161 CRPC, if he is reciting from that or he is changing that, he will be put a question by the prosecutor that he will be cross-examined and he will be asked that you have stated like this in your earlier statement, what do you say? So this type of putting questions or when on recitement, so this is called cross-examination as to previous statement. So any previous statement given by the witness, his same advocate of the same party, he will put question that that you have stated like this. So that type of putting question is prohibited under section 145 Evidence Act. Then another aspect, very important section, that is 154, that is relating to hostile witness. Who is called a hostile witness? Any witness who is changing his version in the court, but previously he has stated so before the investigator. So once any changing, he is reciting his version. Once he is reciting, he will be called a hostile witness. That means he is not supporting the case of the prosecution, rather he is supporting the case of the defense. So what will be the evidentiary value of that say? It is not that once a witness is declared hostile, his entire evidence will be eliminated. Whatever portion he is supporting the case of the prosecution, that will be kept reserved, and the whatever he is not supporting the case for prosecution, that will be eliminated. So whatever he is speaking for the prosecution, that will be retained and rest portions will be eliminated. So that is the system. It is not that, it is not a rule of law that the entire evidence of a hostile witness shall be eliminated. Whatever portion that is acceptable for the court to establish the case of the prosecution, that will be accepted, that will be retained, and the rest portion will be eliminated. So court may permit a witness who calls the witness which might be put in cross-examination by the adverse party. So these things are done by the prosecution advocate. Prosecution advocate means the public prosecutor or APP. They will declare the witness to be hostile by filing a petition to take the leave of the court under 154 Evidence Act. Thereafter the leave will be granted. After it is granted, he will be permitted to put that question whatever the adverse party would have cross-examined. So this is the provision given under section 154, and if these things are not done by the prosecution, then definitely the evidentiary value of the witness shall be 0. That's why it is incumbent on the prosecution advocates and it is the duty of the prosecutors to put that hostile witness certain questions and under the provision of section 154. Now let us come to the last part of the evidence, that is called refreshing memory, that is given under section 159 of Evidence Act. Refreshing memory means suppose a witness has given a statement under 161 statement 10 years ago or 5 years ago. It is practically not possible to keep in memory on which date the incident took place, what was the time, where. So these things can be when a summon will be sent to him, when he will appear before the court, he will be refreshed the entire case memory by the prosecutor, and the prosecutor will show all the papers, document whatever he has filed or whatever was intended to be seen to him, and everything will be done, and so that the entire evidence will be refreshed in his memory. After refreshing, he will be permitted to give his evidence in the court after taking oath. So these are certain systems given under stipulated under our Evidence Act. Without any refreshing memory, if a witness is standing in the dock without any refresh, then every possibility the prosecution case will be hampered. That's why it is very important for refreshing the witnesses, because if the cases is very old and the incident have taken very long back. So this refreshing is a very vital provision under this law. And the witnesses are authorized under law, under this 159 Evidence Act, they are authorized under law to be refreshed by the prosecutor. So these are in nutshell the entire bits of the entire Indian Evidence Act. But one thing we have to remember, the entire case of the prosecution, it is the duty of prosecution to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt, and the duty of the defense to establish his innocence by preponderance of probability. If we are sticking to these 2 points, the entire evidence that will be given under this law will be very much relevant for the prosecution as well as for defense. Certain very good chapters like that, many theories, last seen theory, circumstantial evidence, all these things are very much relevant under this law in judging the case. So the entire Evidence Act is purely a procedural law, and whatever the procedures that is given under this act have to be followed very sincerely and meticulously by the prosecution. And if these are followed very sincerely and meticulously, then definitely the case of the prosecution will be very stronger, and definitely it will lead to convict the accused in the case. So these are tidbits of the Indian Evidence Act.